Yeah, I see y'all out there. Welcome to Chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So the day has come. We do have the Sinquefield Cup 2022. The best players in the world, on the globe. And this is round one. They just got done with this game, like literally right now. And so I have the Shakhriyar Mamedyarov game versus Wesley. So we're going to see who is Malakas in this one. So, as always, for all my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Magandang umaga, magandang hapon, magandang araw, magandang gabi. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video, aking mga kaibigan. Hopefully everything is going great for you. Ingat lagi, mabuning pagbati to you. Anybody who is coming from Azerbaijan, I will say salam and chak sagol. I really appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look, see what we got for this game. All right, so we got the move D4. You know, jumping out with craziness. We got knight to F6. We got knight F3, E6, C4, D5, knight to C3. And we do have the move C5. So we have the Tarrasch variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. Or Queen's Gambit, Queen's Pawn. Tarrasch variation, right? And so basically Black is just saying, hey, bro, you doing a whole lot in the center. I'm trying to do a whole lot in the center. So basically, as you can see, these four pawns have some tension. So we're, you know, Black is trying to break what White is doing down. You know, usually in this position, if we back up, we will see a semi-Slav or the top moves are C6 and bishop to E7. Just keeping everything solid, you know, kind of seeing what White is going to be doing. But, you know, we didn't see that. So we're kind of in the middle of the pack here with C5. We got pawn taking D5, pawn taking D4, queen taking D4, pawn taking D4, and then we do have bishop to G5. Basically, what White is doing in this position is they have basically everything centered around trying to attack the crap out of this pawn. They're like, you know what? I'm going to move rook over here. I'm going to try to like see if I can get my bishop checking, you know, all kinds of stuff. So, of course, Black needs to kind of do something about that. So we do see bishop to E7. We got the move E3. We got castles by Black and rook coming to D1. And like I said, you know, Black is like, hey, bro, you got an ISO D pawn, and I'm kind of hungry. So let me try to, you know, hook that up. So, you know, why not attack some weaknesses, right? So bishop does come to E7, and this is like super duper perfect simply because knight cannot come to G5. So as you guys are aware, sometimes, you know, whenever you do have a bishop kind of hanging out here, if you can place knight to G5, you can kind of do a little bit to get rid of it. But, you know, you kind of strengthen Black a little bit. So, I mean, everything is everything here. We do see the move bishop to D3. We got H6. Not only is this attacking this bishop, but it's creating some lift for our king. Might come in play in the future at some point. The bishop comes back to H4. We got knight to C6, hitting the queen. So the queen kind of has to be like, all right, bro, I got to go somewhere, man. So we do see queen over to A4. We got queen down to B6. You know what? Let's make some attacks, homie, because your B2 pawn is looking kind of lonely. So we do see the move rook to D1. The rook F comes to D8. We got castles by White, the rook A to C8, and then we do see rook F to D1. And basically, you see all of White's moves. You know, you got queen to A4 trying to prevent this. You got these rooks right here, and you have, if Black gets too careless, if you push D4 immediately, you will have a bishop to H7 check at the end of everything. So you kind of have to be careful that you're not hanging some pieces. So after rook F comes to D1, we do see the move king to F8. And this is the novelty of the game, even though it makes like a gigantic amount of sense, because literally everything I just got done saying is kind of null and void now, because we do not have bishop taking H7. Or we don't have bishop, you know, H7 check, discovering an attack in this position. So, and we are protecting our bishop. So, you know, if we want to try to move this knight somewhere, you know, at some point, not right now, but later on, you know, we do have that bishop defended. So we do see bishop up to B5. We got the move A6. Bishop takes C6 or rook takes C6. You know, we have removed the knight here. So, you know, we have a lot less as far as pushing this. And we do maybe at some point have a knight to E5 that can come. Because like I said, we removed the defender of that square right here. So, you know, we're just got everything rolling. So the queen does come to D4, offering a queen trade. You know, asking Black what it wants to do. But we're like, hey, man, we're not trading no queens right here. Well, if we do, we're going to do it on my terms. We do see rook D to C8. The queen goes down to D3. And then we do see the move G5. Now, something I want to mention about this. You know, normally This is a little bit dangerous for you to be doing because, I mean, you kind of have your pieces hanging out on the queen side. So you don't really have like the maximum amount of defense in this section of the board. But since the king did move over to f8, then we pretty much have like avoided a lot of different like attacks that white can place on us. So in this particular position, g5 was actually the absolute best move. So, you know, we're doing good. So we do see the move bishop to g3. You didn't have a whole lot of other options. I mean, you don't really just kind of want to go into the, you know, all the little sacrifice trays right here. So the bishop does come to b4, and we kind of in like a slight pickle, just simply because, you know, this bishop is kind of pinning this knight down. So you got to kind of try to defend it somehow. And the absolute best way to defend it is the move bishop to e5. I know I said earlier, I was like, man, knight to e5 would be extra great. It's just a beautiful square for the knight. But right now, we kind of have to defend just a touch. Not only are we defending here, we are making it possible to go bishop to d4 and throw some attacks ourselves. The knight does come down to e4, and there is an insane amount of pressure going on for black in this position, even though it's dead even, of course. The computer's like, hey, man, like, there's nothing going on here. There's nothing to see. Just keep it moving. We do see the move over to c2. We got bishop taking c3 and then bishop taking c3. And then we do see the move bishop to f5. And it might look kind of questionable. You don't really want to leave your queen there at all. Just simply because if the knight takes here, I mean, you're either kind of stuck taking that bishop, but this rook is going to be hanging at the end of that. And so the best move in the actual position was knight to e5. I won't really too much go into it, but knight to e5 was definitely a nice counterattack. And black doesn't really have much better to go than to go rook back to c7. And you have a nice little attack going there. We do see the move bishop to d4, just, you know, asking a question to the queen. What does it want to do? So the queen does come down to b5. And there's really nothing wrong with this trade. Like, if you want to just go queen takes and then pawn takes, I mean, you're not really losing anything. You're just going to be trading rooks, and the rook is going to come down. And, I mean, everything is fairly good in this particular position. So, I mean, you know, you're good to go. We do see queen going to a3 with check. And the king does sidestep back over to g8. But, you know, white kind of has their own pieces kind of like, you know, over here. So you're not really in that big of a danger by stepping back over to g8. The rook does take c6. We got pawn taking c6. We do see the move queen to e7. I think this is interesting because literally the game that I did yesterday, we had a queen to e7, and then it was like a whole bunch of tactics. But we don't really have the same in this particular position. But we have reached a point in the game that if you do want to pause the video, there is a really, really nice move that black can actually play in this position. And it kind of puts, you know, white into kind of a little bit of a pickle. Go ahead and try to pause the video and see if you can find that move. Okay, so this is not actually what we saw in the game. But I think quite a few of you guys, like most of you guys probably, can figure out this move. The thing that should be standing out to you, like there are two things that I'm like a broken record talking about all the time. Undefended pieces, you can never underestimate that, and f7, f2. You literally, after I told you that, you probably should see the move. Queen to e2 is the move in this position. And like I said, it puts white in kind of a pickle. You do have this undefended rook, but then also you are looking at a queen to f2 with check. The only move in this position is rook over to f1, which puts you in a very, very defensive position. And then you will be seeing the move c5. And you can see black is really just kind of pushing white back. It's not like they're just winning, but this is a very, very like attacking initiative type of position. But like I said, this is not what we saw in the game. After the queen came to e7, we actually saw bishop back to e6. Now, you really don't, I mean, everything is protected. And like I said, queen to e2 was like by far the best move. So bishop doesn't really need to move anywhere. I mean, it's already on a good square. So bishop coming back to e6, I mean, you're not really, I mean, I think that Wesley was kind of thinking at some point knight to e5 will come. And we're looking at, you know, possibly having this. But then it's like you can move bishop back at that time. So anyway, he just got, you know, real like, you know, let me just make sure I'm solid, and went back to e6, which I mean, this is not like a bad move at all, but you know, we do see the move b4. We got a5, a3, pawn takes b4, pawn takes b4, and then we do see the queen coming back to b8. Bishop does come to e5, and then we do see the rook going over to e8, and the white queen is actually trapped. So we really kind of are committed to taking this queen on b8. So that is what we do. Bishop takes b8, rook takes e7. And that is the first of a few Zweichenszug moves that we see. You know, you're like, hey, my queen's hit, but I'm going to go ahead and go rook e8. So like I said, we get into this situation here. We do see the move knight to d4, which looks really pleasing, but, you know, it's not really doing a super duper attack because we do have the second Zweichenszug move. It's like, hey, my bishop is hit, but your bishop is hit, bro. The bishop comes back to e5. We see bishop back to d7. We got f3 because it's like, man, I'm gonna knock your knight around, man. Your knight is like not gonna live here for free. And then Black says, you know what, man? I've been like really killing the whole Zweichenszug in between move game. So he says, I'm gonna do it again. So it's like Wesley So is like, I'm not moving none of my pieces ever. So he goes f6, attacking this bishop, you're really nicely placed on e5. And then we do see pawn takes e4, pawn takes e5, and then the knight does retreat back to f3. This does allow rook takes b4, but, you know, we're getting our own situation rolling. We do see pawn taking d5, pawn taking d5, rook taking d5, bishop to c6, and then the rook does take e5. And, I mean, even though the computer says it's super dead even, you do kind of have a pawn. And in the game, we actually see the king coming down to f7. I mean, you could have taken here on f3. It wouldn't have super duper changed much. It would have kind of just shifted this pawn over. But, I mean, it's an open position. You got a bishop. Maybe you can get some things rolling. You never know. But like I said, the king does come to f7. We got king up to f2. Rook to b2 with check because why not? The king goes up to g3. We see the rook down to e2. But it's like, hey, bro, I'm going to get a bishop. You know, just leave your bishop there. Don't touch it. It's okay. I'm going to take it for free. We do see rook over to c5. The bishop comes down to e4, getting itself in safety. The rook does come to c3, so now we have just defended everything we got. The king does come down to f6. We see rook over to a3. We got the move h5, and I mean, it can get kind of dicey. Like, if you don't, like, be careful because, you know, you're going to be getting checked coming up. You know, maybe you got some g4s coming and stuff. I mean, we're putting a lot of pressure on this g2 pawn. So you kind of have to do something to slow things down. So we do see the move h4. We got g4, like I said. We throw in the rook to a6 check first. The king goes back to g7. And this was a very critical point here. Because if Wesley So had gone king over to e7, then it would have been a completely, like, whole different situation. Like, it would have actually been pretty losing. So it was very imperative that Wesley So found king to g7 here. Of course, you're not going up to f7 because you're going to be looking at a fork C. We don't want to have that, man. That's just completely lost. So king came to g7. We do see the knight over to d4. We do have to allow this, though. So this is actually the best variation. Rook takes g2 a check. The king goes up to f4. Only move. Bishop goes down to d3, tickling that rook, trying to see, you know, if it's going to laugh or not. We do see the rook over to d6 because we do have a discovered attack if you leave your bishop there and do nothing. So we do see the rook going over to f2 with check. The king goes up to e5. The king goes over to f7, avoiding that check I was talking about. We do see the move e4. We got g3, which kind of looks like, man, I mean, black is doing a little something over here, man. But, I mean, everything is a-okay. Don't be scared. Rook to d7 with check. We do see the king up back to g8. Rook goes up to d8 with check. The rook goes up to f8, and you have a decision you make. Do you move away, which is perfectly fine, or do you go ahead and take on f8? And so that's what we see in the game. Rook takes f8 with check. King takes f8, and then we do see the king go to f4. We got the move g2, and then we have, like, literally the most key move probably in this entire game, and that is knight down to f3. So you had to be calculating back in the day that if this pawn starts to move, you have to protect this g1 square. So that is definitely something that Shaq was thinking about. So the king goes over to e7. We see king down to g3. Bishop takes e4, king takes g2. And then we have a situation where bishop takes f3 with check, king takes f3. And then I'll go through the rest of the moves for you. But as you guys can see, this is a pretty drawn situation. You just have to make sure that you don't give, you know, the other side the opposition. Because if white can get to one of these key squares, then they can have a possibility of winning even though they're the rook pawns. And if black can get to one of these key squares, then they have a situation where they might be able to do something. But like I said, we do have rook pawns. So everything is kind of leaning towards basically everything being a draw. It's not like a gigantically advanced concept, but that is something that I don't believe I've mentioned before in its key squares. You know, if these pawns were like in the center of the board, you know, for white, these are the most important squares. And then, of course, on the other side, too. And then for black, these are important squares. If you can force your king into those squares, you have a really good chance of promoting your pawn and winning your opponent's pawn. So, you know, that's a little in-game stuff there for you. But we do see the move king to f7. We got king to f4. And then Wesley So takes the opposition with king to f6. We see king over to e4, and we see this position repeated a couple of times. And we have gotten into the position right here where both of the players have drawn by threefold repetition. So even though it kind of had like some little exciting points, and you know that queen to e2, you know, we never know what might have happened if that move had gotten played. But we did end up at the end of the day with both players playing a really, really strong game. So Malaka C. Wesley so at Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. And that is all she wrote for that first round. And I will be seeing you guys tomorrow